All right, finally, number 4 on the mixed review sheet goes along with number 6 on your formative. So if you needed help with the factoring, you're going to take a look at this video. Now, the first one on the mixed review actually corresponds with part D on your formative. So if you needed help with that one, you're going to take a look here. This is one we haven't done before. This is going to be a double factor. What we're going to look for to start is greatest common factor. Anytime you see the word factor, you should be looking for a GCF. There's not always going to be one, but it should be the first thing that pops into your head. Can I take something out of every single term? Now remember that when your leading coefficient, the first number is a negative, you're going to factor out a negative, so we're going to start with that. With numbers, we look for the biggest number that we can divide everything by, and for these three numbers, the 2, the 12, and the 80, the biggest we can divide by is a 2. We can't go any bigger than that. If we try to go for a 6 or a 4 or a 12 or a 10, 2 divided by those numbers doesn't work, right? And then finally, for our variables, we look for the smallest of the exponents. We've got a 3, a 2, and a 1. Remember, if I don't see an exponent, it's a 1. So we're going to divide everything also by x to the first. So our GCF is negative 2x to the first. We don't have to write 1 as an exponent. I'm not going to, but if you do, there's no harm in that. So what happens then, remember your GCF, let me write in a different color here, comes on the outside. And then when I divide, it's what's left over on the inside. Negative 2 divided by negative 2 is positive 1. And then remember with your exponents, you're subtracting. 3 minus 1 is 2. So we're left with x squared on the inside. Negative 12 divided by negative 2 is positive 6. X squared divided by x to the first. 2 minus 1 is 1. So x to the first. And then finally 80 divided by negative 2 is negative 40. X1 divided by x to the first divided by x to the first is 1. They essentially just disappear. Okay, so we're left with negative 2x times the quantity x squared plus 6x minus 40. Now, inside the parentheses, what we have is a trinomial that we can factor one more time. So we're going to look for two numbers that multiply to negative 40 and add to positive 6. Okay. When I multiply to a negative 40, remember we're going to want one positive, one negative. Let's talk about that in just a second. So in your calculator, you'll do negative 40 divided by 1 is 40. Negative 40 divided by 2, or just 40. You don't have to worry about the negative just yet. Divided by 2 is 20. 40 divided by 3 is a decimal. 40 divided by 4 is 10. 40 divided by 5 is 8. 40 divided by 6 and 7 won't work, and then we get the 8 and the 5 again. So those are our 4 factor pairs of 40. Now, since I want to add to a positive 6, we need our bigger numbers to be positive. So all the bigger numbers on the right will be positive, all the smaller numbers on the left will be negative. And then we want the pair that adds to a positive 6. So we're going to go with that negative 4 and that positive 10. So this trinomial factors into the x minus 4 and the x plus 10. But don't forget that that negative 2x hasn't gone anywhere. We didn't do anything with it. We're just going to bring it along with us. And this is your final factored form. So if you didn't get that far on the formative, no big deal. We hadn't covered it in class. As long as you divide it out by that 2, that's really mostly what I was looking for. And if you can take it that one step further, even better. Okay? Now, the second one over here corresponds with part B on your formative. So we'll talk about this guy. We're looking for, because the leading coefficient is a 1, we're looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 9 and add up to 0. Okay, so 9 is either a 1 and a 9 or a 3 and a 3, but remember we need one positive, one negative. 0 isn't negative or positive, but remember, in order to add up to a 0, you need one negative, one positive. You need them to be the same value, but opposite signs. So the 3's, but one negative and one positive, because when I add those together, we get exactly what we want. We want that 0x, okay? So the two binomials that we end up with are our x minus 3 and the x plus 3. Okay. Now, This one corresponds with part A on the formative, where we're still going to find two numbers that multiply to a -2 and add up to a -3, but this time we have that -2 in front, so we have to take that into account. This is the one where we're going to do the backwards factoring. So let's start with our multiplication table. And instead of putting in, like, what are we going to multiply on the outside, we put what the product is on the inside. Remember, your first term goes in the first box, and your second term goes in the last term goes in the last box. The only way to get a 2x is by 2x and a 1x. And then -2 is either a 1 and a -2, or a -1 and a +2. So the nice thing about that 2 is that it's prime. So let's go ahead and guess and check. All right, if I do the first option was a +1 and a -2. 1x times 1 is 1x, and 2x times -2 is -4x. And if I add those two values together, we get a -3x. Awesome, we did it the first time. So we add those together, we get our -3x. And so what we want to do now is on the outside of the multiplication table are the factors that we're going to put into the parentheses. These are our binomials. Okay, so our final factored form is 2x plus 1 times 1x minus 2. You don't have to put the 1 in front. In fact, I'd rather you didn't, but if you do, not a big deal. 2x plus 1 times x minus 2. Okay? And then finally, the last one here corresponds with part C on the formative, which is a greatest common factor. Okay? So we're going to start by looking for the number, the biggest number that evenly divides a 6 and a 4. So we're going to divide everything by a 2. I don't have to divide by a -2 because my 6 here, the leading coefficient, whatever number's first, that's the sign of your greatest common factor. So if it's a positive, your GCF is positive. If it's negative, your GCF is negative. So we'll have a +2. And then I look for the smallest exponent. So between a 5 and a 4, we're going to use the 4 because that's the smaller. And between, let's get a different color, the 8 and the 2, we're going to use the 2. Because that is the smaller of the two. So the GCF is 2x to the 4th y squared. 2x to the 4th y squared. Here we go. GCF on the outside is a coefficient. And then we multiply. What's on the inside is the quotient, what we're left with when we divide. 6 divided by 2 is 3. X to the 5th divided by x to the 4th. Remember, we multiply. 5 minus 4 is 1. But I don't have to put the 1. I'm going to get rid of that. And then 8 divided by y to the 8th divided by y squared. 8 minus 2 is 6. So y to the 6th. And then we just go in order. Just go left to right. -4 divided by 2 is -2. X to the 4th divided by x to the 4th. Boom, 1. So those guys are gone. And then y squared divided by y squared, also 1. And we're done. There is your final factored form.